This morning we're going to be covering the replication read preferences mode, read preference modes, available when we are setting up a replicated environment, that is. And the first thing that I want to briefly talk about is that I do not have examples of this in my test environment here because I do not have replication enabled. So we're just going to kind of go over what options are available. So there are 5 read preference modes. And note this is in version 2.2 and beyond. Okay, the first 2 modes, which are pretty straightforward, and I think most people understand, basically is the primary and secondary modes. Okay, so first in the primary modes, it's pretty obvious. CRUD operations all happen from the primary, right? That's how the replica set primary. Okay, secondary, the exact same thing except it all happens from the secondary, right? So you have primary is one read preference mode, and then of course you have secondary, and it's pretty straightforward. Everything's happening from, if it's primary, it's going to be the primary, and if it's secondary, it's going to be the secondary. The one note there, though, is that if you were not to specify anything, the setup will be primary. Okay, so basically that's the default, if you would. Then the other 2 modes are the primary preferred and the secondary preferred. Okay, now again, it's actually pretty straightforward here. So primary preferred, what it sounds like, basically most of the operations are going to happen from the primary. That's the preferred, if you would. In other words, as long as provided that it's available, things are going to be happening from, the operations are going to be happening from the primary of the set. In secondary preferred, it's the inverse, right? Or not the inverse, but it's the opposite way around with the secondary. In other words, all operations are happening from the secondary, provided that it's available. And if it's not, then it will happen from the primary. Okay, so in the primary preferred, generally speaking, everything happens from the primary. If it's not available, secondary. Secondary preferred, everything's happening from the secondary. If it's not available, then it's going to be doing the operations from the primary. Then finally we have the 5th read preference mode, which is the nearest. Okay, so this is occurring, basically operations read from the member of the replica set with, and this is per Tengen's documentation, it's being read from the set with the least network latency, regardless of the member's type. Okay, so it's not looking at the member's type, that doesn't mean anything. It's looking at the least network latency. So depending on how you want your environment set up, and again, it goes back to, you may want primary, you may want secondary, you may want primary preferred or secondary preferred, or again, you may want something like nearest. Those will work in different environments, and it really depends on the environment. So I can think of a couple of clients in which primary was definitely the way to go, but then I can also think of a couple of clients where nearest was preferred. I have not looked at doing an environment in which we wanted secondary preferred. That's the only one that I haven't really done with a client yet. So, but those are the read preference modes, and if you want to get further information, I would definitely take a look at the documentation on that.